The battle between McLaren and Alpine over Oscar Piastri's services for 2023 has dominated the Formula One news agenda over recent weeks. Although ultimately it was a matter for F1's Contract Recognition Board and cost Alpine nearly £540,000 in legal fees, it also included the situation descending at times into personal insults. Piastri has faced accusations of lacking integrity by Alpine team principal Otmar Szafnauer for turning his back on the squad that helped guide his career as part of its Young Driver Academy since 2020. Piastri was also on the receiving end of criticism from Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff, who made pointed remarks about integrity and karma. On the other side of the table, McLaren has faced a backlash on social media for the way that it put together a deal with Piastri for 2023 while it still had Daniel Ricciardo under a firm contract. But with the dust now settled on the case and both sides having had to present to the CRB its truth about what happened, a clearer picture of what really went on has emerged, and the situation is very different from how some presumed. The reality is that rather than the Piastri affair being a case of a ruthless young driver and his management team betraying a team, it was more a matter of them feeling let down and instead concluding that they had no option but to look elsewhere or risk getting nothing. And from McLaren's perspective, it was guilty only of chasing the most competitive driver lineup it could when a once-in-a-generation opportunity fell into its hands. The case between Alpine and the CRB is understood to have revolved around whether a terms sheet agreement, loosely mapping out Alpine's plan for Piastri between 2020 and 2023, that was lodged with the Contracts Recognition Board should have been treated as a definitive contract. This document had originally been sent to Piastri and manager Mark Webber on November 15, 2021, as part of correspondence detailing the team's response to it, taking up an option it had. At the time, and agreed in subsequent emails, Alpine and Piastri Webber were clear that the best way to progress from this term sheet was to sort out two separate contracts, one for being reserved in 2022 and another as an F1 race driver for 2023-24. In a letter that Alpine CEO Laurent Rossi sent on that date, he promised that a proper F1 agreement would be sent to him shortly, with a view to executing the same no later than 10 business days after receipt of the same. No such F1 agreement was forthcoming though, either for the reserve deal or a race contract, and it's understood that there became growing frustration from Webber and the Piastri camp about the delays. In correspondence between Webber and Alpine's legal team over the following weeks, it became increasingly clear that things were not proceeding as quickly as the former F1 driver would have liked. This was initially blamed on bottlenecks in the system caused by a lack of resources, and then further delays as the team prepared for the launch of its new car. Amid the build-up to the reveal of the A522 in late February, the team promised matters would be settled. Webber duly asked if the contract could be sorted out by March 1st, so the Piastri camp could have time to evaluate it before signing ahead of the season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix. On March 2nd, Webber was promised that the contract would be with him later that day. 2 days later, however, Webber was sent a draft reserve driver agreement, with a note that details of an F1 agreement for 2023-2024 would follow as early as the following week. This latter agreement did not land, as first it was explained that there had been delays caused by arranging a shared reserve driver role with McLaren that had been agreed with Alpine. With the F1 season looming, and Alpine required by the Concord Agreement to lodge a super license application with the CRB if Piastri was going to be allowed to run on track, it was proposed that the reserve driver arrangement get pushed through to sort the super license. Then, a separate F1 race driver agreement for 2023 and 2024 could follow at a later date. With the reserve driver agreement not signed by either driver or team at that point, Alpine duly sent to the CRB on March 14th a document containing the November 2021 terms sheet signed by both parties. The team had added a label to the top stating it as a legally binding heads of terms, even though what was supposed to be an attached contract in a separate sealed envelope that would only be used in a CRB dispute was not signed and did not feature these words. This term sheet was also crucially headed "Subject to Contract" and laid out the likely plan for Piastri to be a reserve driver for 1 year before a potential race seat in 2023. The documents lodged referenced specifically only the 2022 reserve driver role and made no mention of any extensions or options to extend. 1 day later, Alpine finally sent to Webber and Piastri its proposed F1 agreement, although without anything definite in terms of teams for 2023 and beyond. That only came on May the 19th, when Piastri was sent a proposal to sign a 4-year contract from 2023 to 2026. But crucially, this was not exclusively to race for Alpine, where his hopes had been pinned. The timeline laid out for him was to race for Williams in 2023. Then obviously, pending Alpine's original plans for Fernando Alonso, in 2024, Piastri would either stay on at Williams for a second season or return to Alpine if the Spaniard left F1.